I always thought we had the perfect life. 10 years of marriage, 2 beautiful daughters, and a life built on mutual trust and ambition. My wife, Jessica, was the quintessential modern influencer. Her Instagram blog, showcasing everything from DIY crafts to parenting tips, brought in a steady income that rivaled my earnings from the law firm I built from the ground up. Together, we were the envy of our social circle, a power couple who seemed to have it all. But perfection is a fragile facade, and I started noticing cracks in ours about 6 months ago. It began with small things. Jessica's sudden obsession with late-night editing sessions, her phone constantly buzzing with notifications, and her increasingly distracted demeanor during family dinners. I chalked it up to the pressures of running her blog, which had grown exponentially in the past year. I was proud of her success, but it seemed to come at a cost. We'd always been a team, but the partnership started feeling one-sided. I handled the brunt of the household expenses, even though her income had reached 6 figures. It wasn't about the money, it never was, but the imbalance of effort was starting to weigh on me. While I was buried in contracts and client meetings, Jessica seemed to be living in a curated bubble of content creation and brand partnerships. Our intimate moments became less frequent. She brushed it off, blaming exhaustion or the kids' demands. I wanted to believe her, but a nagging feeling told me there was more to it. The turning point came one Saturday morning. Jessica had a photo shoot scheduled with her team, or so she claimed. I decided to surprise her with coffee and pastries, hoping to rekindle some connection. When I arrived at the studio, it was locked, with no sign of anyone inside. My heart sank as I stood there, the tray of coffee trembling in my hands. Later that evening, I confronted her casually, asking how the shoot went. She hesitated, her eyes darting to the side, before launching into a rambling explanation about technical issues delaying the session. It was the first time I caught her lying, or at least suspected it. That suspicion would grow into an obsession. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing other anomalies. The frequent mentions of a new business partner named Ethan, a charismatic photographer who had apparently been helping her with her projects. I wanted to trust her, but something about the way she spoke about him made my skin crawl. Then, there were the late-night text messages. She'd giggle softly, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone, and when I asked who it was, she'd dismissively say it was a work matter. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my insecurities were projecting onto her harmless interactions. But deep down, I knew I wasn't imagining it. The breaking point came when I found her phone unlocked on the kitchen counter. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages, my worst fears taking shape in front of me. Ethan's name appeared repeatedly, the conversations filled with inside jokes, flirtatious emojis, and plans to meet up for creative brainstorming. That night, as Jessica slept peacefully beside me, my mind raced with 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? What did Ethan have that I didn't? And most importantly, was I prepared to confront the truth, no matter how devastating it might be? I spent the next few days in a fog of disbelief and anger, my mind consumed by the messages I had read. Jessica acted as though nothing had changed, her laughter filling the house as she played with our daughters, her Instagram posts painting a picture of idyllic family life. But behind that facade was a betrayal I couldn't ignore. I couldn't confront her outright. Not yet. I needed to know the full scope of what was happening. Was this just flirtation, or had it gone further? My years as a lawyer had taught me to be thorough, to gather evidence before making my case. So, I did what I'd never imagined I would. I started watching her. Jessica's phone was always within arm's reach, a fact that had gone unnoticed until now. She took it with her to the bathroom, kept it on silent, and frequently flipped it face down when she wasn't using it. I began paying attention to her schedule, noting when she claimed to have meetings or photo shoots. Her routine had always been fluid, but now every gap in her day felt like a puzzle piece waiting to be placed. The following Saturday, she announced she'd be meeting Ethan for a branding consultation. Her tone was casual, but I saw the flicker of nerves in her eyes as she said it. I nodded, pretending not to care, but the moment she left, I followed. Jessica's car led me to a trendy cafe on the other side of town. I parked across the street, my heart pounding as I watched her walk inside. Minutes later, Ethan arrived. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded the kind of effortless charm that made people notice him. They greeted each other warmly, his hand lingering on her back as they walked to a table in the corner. I watched from my car as they laughed and leaned in close, their body language intimate in a way that left no room for doubt. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, my chest burning with a mix of rage and humiliation. This wasn't just about work. Whatever they were discussing, it had crossed the line long ago. When they left the cafe, I followed again, my suspicions confirmed as they drove to a boutique hotel nearby. I parked in the lot and waited, staring at the entrance long after they disappeared inside. My hands shook as I tried to decide what to do. Should I confront them now, burst in and demand answers? Or should I wait, let them think they'd gotten away with it, and gather more evidence? I chose the latter, though it nearly killed me to sit there, imagining what was happening inside those walls. When they finally emerged over an hour later, Jessica's hair was slightly disheveled, her face glowing in a way I hadn't seen in years. Ethan's hand rested on her lower back as he walked her to her car, their closeness unmistakable. That night, I couldn't even look at her. She came home smiling, carrying a bag from a high-end boutique and gushing about a new collaboration opportunity. I muttered a few words in response, pretending to be engrossed in my laptop, but my mind was racing. As she disappeared upstairs to put the girls to bed, I opened the folder on my computer where I'd saved the photos and video I'd taken that day. Each image felt like a dagger to my heart, but I knew they were necessary. This wasn't just about my emotions anymore. If Jessica thought she could tear apart our life without consequences, she was wrong. In the days that followed, I began putting together a plan. My first call was to a private investigator, someone who could confirm what I already knew and dig deeper into Ethan's background. If Jessica was going to lie, I wanted every piece of evidence to expose the truth. My second call was to a divorce attorney, an old colleague who owed me a favor. He listened patiently as I explained the situation, then assured me he'd help me protect what mattered most, my daughters and the life I'd built. Meanwhile, I played the role of the oblivious husband, pretending nothing was wrong as Jessica carried on with her double life. But inside, I was a storm of anger and betrayal, counting down the days until the facade would come crashing down. The days that followed were an intricate dance of suspicion and restraint. Jessica continued her routine as though nothing was amiss, while I kept up my act as the supportive husband. But beneath the surface, I was unraveling. Every smile she gave me felt like a lie, every touch like an insult. The private investigator I'd hired was thorough, sending me updates daily. Photos of Jessica and Ethan at various locations piled up, each one more damning than the last. But then, something happened that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening, just past 10 p.m., and Jessica was upstairs editing photos for a brand campaign, or so she said. I sat in the living room, my laptop open but my focus elsewhere, when I heard her phone buzz on the kitchen counter. Normally, she never left it out of her sight, but tonight, she'd left it charging while she worked. My pulse quickened as I glanced toward the glowing screen. It was a notification from Ethan. Tomorrow's all set. Can't wait to see you in action. Winky face. My mind raced. What was happening tomorrow? I knew I needed more than blurry cafe photos and hotel visits to solidify my case. This was my chance. Without hesitation, I grabbed her phone and navigated to the settings, activating the screen mirroring feature to sync her activity to an old tablet I'd stashed in the garage. It was a trick I'd learned years ago during a cybersecurity case, and now it would be my secret weapon. Minutes later, I returned the phone to its exact position, ensuring Jessica wouldn't notice. The tablet would now mirror everything she did on her phone in real time. Texts, emails, photos, all of it would be logged without her knowledge. The next day, I left work early, unable to shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Sure enough, around 1 p.m., a notification popped up on the tablet. Ethan shared his location. Curious, I tapped on it and found a map pin marking a location just outside the city, a secluded park near the river. My blood ran cold. Jessica's text to Ethan followed shortly after. Perfect spot. I'll be there by 2:30. I decided to follow her, but this time I wasn't going in blind. I grabbed the private investigator surveillance equipment he'd left me for emergencies, a small audio recorder and a telephoto lens. If I was going to confront Jessica, I wanted everything to be documented. At exactly 2:30, I parked a safe distance from the marked location. Hidden behind a row of bushes, I spotted her car and Ethan's parked side by side. They stood near the riverbank, talking animatedly. She looked radiant, her laughter carrying through the quiet air. I felt like a voyeur in my own life, watching her share a side of herself that she'd long hidden from me. Then came the unexpected twist. As I zoomed in with the camera, capturing every detail of their interaction, a third figure appeared, a woman. She was tall, striking, and furious. She stormed toward them, her voice cutting through the tranquility of the park like a knife. "Jessica, what the hell is this?" the woman shouted, pointing an accusing finger. "You think I wouldn't find out?" I froze, unable to process what I was seeing. Who was this woman? She turned her ire on Ethan next, her voice dripping with venom. "And you? How many times do I have to clean up your messes before you grow up?" Jessica looked panicked, her hands raised defensively. "Emily, calm down. This isn't what you think. Don't lie to me." Emily spat, pulling out her phone and snapping photos of them. "I told you, Ethan, if you ever cross the line again, I'd make sure everyone knew. This wasn't a simple affair. Jessica wasn't just betraying me. She'd entangled herself in something much bigger." My mind raced as I watched the confrontation escalate. Ethan tried to calm Emily down, but her threats grew louder. "Wait until your precious clients see this. You'll be ruined." I used the moment to my advantage, slipping the audio recorder closer to them while they were distracted. Whatever this woman had to say, I needed every word on tape. The argument ended abruptly when Emily stormed off, leaving Jessica and Ethan standing there, visibly shaken. They spoke in hushed tones, too low for me to hear, before parting ways. Jessica returned to her car, her face pale and strained, while Ethan paced along the riverbank, his phone pressed to his ear. I retrieved the recorder and hurried back to my car, my mind spinning. Who was Emily? Was she Ethan's wife, a business partner, or someone else entirely? And why did she seem to have as much to lose as Jessica? That night, as Jessica sat silently at the dinner table, picking at her food, I knew the dynamic had shifted. Whatever had happened at the park had rattled her. My evidence was piling up, but now there was a new layer to uncover, a hidden world I hadn't anticipated. I didn't press her for answers. Not yet. Instead, I slipped the recorder into my desk drawer, ready to replay Emily's words and piece together the full story. Jessica thought she was hiding her secrets, but now I had the tools to unravel them. The morning after the confrontation at the river, Jessica was quieter than usual. She went through the motions of getting the kids ready for school and preparing her own things, but the vibrant energy she once radiated was absent. I watched her closely, my suspicions solidified but still incomplete. I needed one more undeniable fact to confirm what I already knew, a moment that would leave no room for her lies. When Jessica left for another supposed meeting with Ethan later that day, I decided to follow her again. This time, I stayed a safe distance behind, careful not to alert her. My heart pounded as I tailed her car through winding streets, eventually arriving at the same studio she claimed to use for her photo shoots. The parking lot was empty except for her car and Ethan's. I stayed parked across the street, my camera ready, waiting for something damning to occur. The blinds in the studio were drawn, and there was no sign of activity outside. It felt too staged, too convenient. I'd been here once before when I tried to surprise her, and the building had been locked up. Today was no different. Then, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Mr. Reynolds. This is Kara from Jessica's team. Sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask, is there a reason Jessica doesn't let us use the studio anymore? She's been going there with Ethan a lot lately, and it's causing delays in our shoots." My grip on the phone tightened as I read her words. Kara was one of Jessica's assistants, someone she frequently mentioned when describing her hectic work schedule. The fact that her own team was questioning her behavior added another layer of betrayal. She wasn't just lying to me. She was misleading everyone around her. I replied cautiously, not wanting to tip my hand. I wasn't aware of any changes. Thanks for letting me know. I'll look into it. Her response came almost immediately. Thanks. I don't want to make it a big deal, but some of us have noticed. Well, Jessica and Ethan seem really close. It's not our business, but we're worried it's affecting the work. That was it. I no longer needed to piece together cryptic texts or blurry photos. Kara's message, coupled with everything I'd seen, left no doubt about Jessica's infidelity. But I still needed a fact, a definitive moment that would expose her beyond any denial or manipulation. I waited outside the studio for over an hour, my mind racing. When Jessica and Ethan finally emerged, their carefree demeanor only deepened my anger. She laughed at something he said, her hand brushing against his arm as they walked to their cars. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. As she drove off, I decided to make my move. I parked my car in the empty lot and approached the studio door. To my surprise, it was unlocked. I stepped inside, my pulse racing as I surveyed the space. It was small but functional, with photography equipment set up near a white backdrop. Props were scattered around, but something caught my eye, a jacket draped over a chair. It wasn't Jessica's. It was Ethan's, unmistakable from the designer brand she'd casually mentioned he loved. Curiosity propelled me further. On the counter near the workstation sat a camera, still on and connected to a laptop. My heart pounded as I clicked through the photos. Most were innocent, a few headshots and staged images for what looked like a product campaign. But then, I found the folder labeled personal. Inside were photos that left no room for doubt. Jessica and Ethan together, kissing, embracing, and in one, lying tangled on the studio couch. My chest tightened as I stared at the screen, the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me like a physical force. I copied the folder onto a flash drive I carried in my pocket, knowing these images were the final piece of evidence I needed. As I left the studio, my mind churned with a mix of rage and resolve. Jessica thought she could carry on this affair while keeping me in the dark, but her facade was about to crumble. When I arrived home, Jessica was already there cooking dinner and chatting with the kids as if everything was normal. She looked up and smiled as I walked in, but I couldn't muster the energy to respond. My silence didn't seem to faze her. She was too confident, too entrenched in her web of lies to suspect that her carefully constructed world was about to collapse. That night, as Jessica slept, I sat in my office, staring at the flash drive. Tomorrow, everything would change. The moment of reckoning was near, and this time, there would be no escape. The flash drive sat on my desk like a loaded weapon, a collection of evidence that would soon destroy Jessica's carefully curated lies. But simply confronting her with the truth wasn't enough. After everything she'd done, I needed more than just answers. I needed justice. A plan began to take shape in my mind, a way to expose her betrayal so thoroughly that she couldn't twist or deny it. The next morning, I pretended everything was normal. Over breakfast, Jessica casually mentioned that she'd be busy over the next few days with some big projects. I nodded, playing the part of the distracted husband, but I couldn't stop thinking about the photos I'd found in the studio. She didn't suspect a thing. Later that day, my phone buzzed with another message from Kara. Just a heads up, Jessica has a shoot at the studio the day after tomorrow. She told us not to come again. Thought you should know. My heart raced as I read her words. This was it, my opportunity to catch them in the act, to finally shatter any illusion Jessica might try to maintain. I thanked Kara and quickly began planning. If they were meeting at the studio, I would make sure I was there to document everything. This wouldn't just be about exposing her to me. It would be undeniable proof for anyone who needed to see it. The next day, I prepared meticulously. I borrowed a friend's van under the pretense of moving some office equipment, knowing it would give me a better vantage point to observe the studio without being noticed. I packed a small camera, a tripod, and an additional audio recorder, along with spare memory cards. This time, there would be no room for doubt, no chance for Jessica to worm her way out of the truth. The morning of their planned meeting, Jessica left early, claiming she needed to scout locations for an upcoming campaign. I smiled faintly and wished her good luck, knowing exactly where she was headed. As soon as she was out of sight, I grabbed my gear and headed to the studio. I arrived an hour before their scheduled time and parked the van in an alley across the street. From there, I had a clear view of the studio entrance. I set up the camera inside the van, the lens trained on the door, and waited. Jessica arrived first, her car pulling into the lot with practiced ease. She stepped out, dressed casually but attractively, her movements relaxed as she unlocked the studio and went inside. 20 minutes later, Ethan pulled in. He got out of his car carrying a small bag and walked to the door, glancing around briefly before slipping inside. I waited another 10 minutes, giving them enough time to settle in before making my move. With the camera still recording the exterior, I grabbed my audio recorder and quietly approached the studio. The door was locked, but the blinds were drawn poorly, leaving a small gap through which I could see inside. What I saw made my blood boil. Jessica was sitting on the studio couch, laughing as Ethan leaned over her, his hand resting on her thigh. Her body language was unmistakable. This wasn't a colleague. This was a lover. Ethan leaned closer, whispering something that made her laugh even harder. And then, without hesitation, he kissed her. I captured it all. The kiss, the intimate touches, the way Jessica pulled him closer without a hint of guilt. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice when I quietly pushed the door open. My phone camera was already recording as I stepped inside. "Jessica," I said, my voice cold and cutting. They froze, their expressions shifting from shock to panic in an instant. Jessica jumped up, her face draining of color. "Adam, what are you doing here?" she stammered. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, holding up my phone. "But I think the video I just took answers that question." Ethan stood, trying to mask his nervousness with bravado. "Look, man, this isn't what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I snapped, cutting him off. "You think I haven't been watching? You think I didn't know what's been going on?" Jessica reached for me, her voice trembling. "Adam, please, let me explain." "Explain?" I laughed bitterly. "Explain how you've been lying to me for months? How you've been sneaking around behind my back with this piece of trash?" I gestured toward Ethan, whose confidence was rapidly evaporating. "This isn't what it seems," Jessica pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "I made a mistake, but it doesn't mean—" "It doesn't mean what?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "It doesn't mean you destroyed our marriage? It doesn't mean you've been lying to everyone, including your own children?" Jessica sobbed, her words incoherent, but I didn't care. I turned to Ethan, my fury barely contained. "You'd better get out of here," I said coldly, "before I decide to make this even worse for you." Ethan hesitated, glancing at Jessica, who gave him a desperate, pleading look. He muttered something under his breath and bolted for the door, leaving her standing there, alone and broken. I lowered my phone, the weight of everything that had happened crashing down on me. Jessica reached for me again, but I stepped back, the distance between us now insurmountable. "We're done, Jessica," I said quietly, my voice filled with finality. "I'll be in touch through my lawyer." And with that, I walked out, leaving her to face the wreckage she had created. As I drove away from the studio, my hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, my mind racing with a mix of anger and determination. The confrontation had been ugly, but it was only the beginning. Jessica's betrayal wasn't just about me. It was about the life we had built together, the home we had made for our daughters. I wouldn't let her lies poison them, or let her walk away unscathed. When I arrived home, the house felt different. It wasn't the warm, loving space I'd cherished. It was tainted, a place where Jessica's deception had taken root. I walked upstairs to the girls' room, where they were playing with dolls, their laughter piercing my heart. They had no idea what was happening, and I intended to keep it that way. "Hey, girls," I said gently, kneeling down to their level. "How about we go on an adventure tonight? Pack some of your favorite things. We're going to stay at a hotel for a little while." Their eyes lit up, excited by the prospect of a sleepover away from home. I helped them gather their belongings, making sure to include everything they might need for a few days. Once they were ready, I loaded them into the car and drove to a hotel on the other side of town, far enough away that Jessica wouldn't find us easily. The room was small but cozy, with 2 beds and a kitchenette. I set up their things, ordered pizza, and put on a movie to keep them entertained. As they giggled over their dinner, I stepped into the adjoining room I'd booked for myself and pulled out my laptop. It was time to start planning. I called my lawyer first, updating him on everything that had transpired, including the video and photos I captured. He assured me that the evidence was more than enough to secure a favorable divorce settlement and custody of the kids. Next, I reached out to the private investigator, asking him to dig deeper into Ethan's background. I wanted every possible detail, not just for the divorce, but for whatever consequences I could bring upon him professionally and personally. By the time I finished, it was late, and the girls were asleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. Jessica hadn't called or texted. Not yet. I knew it was only a matter of time before she realized what was happening. It wasn't long before the silence was broken. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from her. I let it ring, then silenced it. Minutes later, it buzzed again. This time, it was a string of frantic texts. "Adam, where are you? You can't just take the girls like this. Please, let's talk. I need to explain." I ignored every message, my resolve unwavering. She had chosen this path, and now she would face the consequences. Around midnight, there was a loud banging on the door of the hotel room. I knew it was her before I even opened it. Jessica stood there, her face tear-streaked and flushed with anger. "Where are the girls?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "They're safe," I replied coldly, stepping into the hallway and closing the door behind me. "I'm not letting you near them until we sort this out." "You can't do this," she shouted, her hands balled into fists. "They're my children too, and I won't let them be exposed to your lies," I said sharply. "You think I don't know what's been going on? I have the photos, the videos, the messages. You've been sneaking around with Ethan, destroying our family while pretending everything is fine." Jessica's eyes widened, panic flashing across her face. "Adam, it's not what you think." "Don't," I interrupted, my voice firm. "Don't insult my intelligence. I saw you with him, Jessica. I have proof of everything. Your little rendezvous at the studio, the kisses, the texts. You lied to me, to our kids, to everyone. You don't get to play the victim now." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she tried to reach for me. "I made a mistake, Adam. I was lonely, and I let things go too far. But I love you, and I love our family. Please don't do this." Her words only fueled my anger. "Love? You don't destroy what you love. You don't lie and cheat and expect to come back as if nothing happened. I gave you everything, Jessica, and you threw it away for some cheap thrill with him." She broke down, sobbing into her hands, but I refused to relent. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my tone icy. "I've already contacted a lawyer. The divorce papers will be ready soon, and I'm filing for full custody of the girls. I'm done playing the fool, and I won't let you use them to save face." Jessica looked up, desperation etched into her features. "Adam, please don't take them away from me. I'll do anything, counseling, therapy, whatever it takes. You still here? You should have thought about that before you betrayed me." She had no response, only more tears and incoherent apologies. Finally, I turned and walked back into the room, locking the door behind me. Her cries faded as I sat on the edge of the bed, exhausted but resolute. This wasn't over, but for the first time in months, I felt in control. Jessica had made her choices, and now I was making mine. The life we had was gone, but I would rebuild stronger, better, and without her deceit weighing me down. The fallout from Jessica's betrayal was swift and merciless. With the video and photographic evidence I had collected, I not only secured a favorable divorce settlement, but also gained full custody of our daughters. My lawyer, a seasoned professional who had seen it all, praised the thoroughness of my documentation. Jessica was left with little room to argue. But the divorce was only the beginning. Jessica had built her career and her identity on the facade of a perfect life. Her Instagram blog, with its carefully curated posts about family values and balancing work and motherhood, was her pride and joy. It also brought in most of her income, thanks to lucrative sponsorship deals, and I intended to dismantle it, piece by piece. I began by anonymously leaking the video and photos of her and Ethan to a few key outlets, ones that specialized in influencer drama and gossip. I made sure to include screenshots of the messages she had exchanged with him, carefully omitting any content that might harm my daughters. Within hours, the story had gone viral. Headlines like "Family Blogger's Secret Affair Exposed" and "The Fall of Jessica Reynolds" flooded social media. Her sponsors dropped her almost immediately, severing ties to avoid the backlash. Jessica tried to salvage her reputation, posting tearful videos and long captions about making mistakes and seeking forgiveness. But the damage was done. The same followers who had idolized her now turned against her, flooding her posts with angry comments and accusations. Her once thriving blog was now a graveyard of broken partnerships and shattered illusions. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my life. With full custody of the girls, I moved us into a new home, smaller but cozy, and far from the memories of betrayal that haunted the old house. The girls adjusted quickly, their laughter filling the space as we created new routines. I poured my energy into being the best father I could be, ensuring they felt loved and supported despite the upheaval. Professionally, my law firm flourished. The distraction of Jessica's infidelity had once threatened to derail my focus, but now it became a source of drive. I channeled my anger and heartbreak into my work, taking on new cases and expanding my client base. The firm grew, and with it, my confidence. I was no longer the man who had been blindsided by betrayal. I was stronger, sharper, and more determined than ever. As for Jessica, her life unraveled further. Without her blog's income, she struggled to maintain her lifestyle. Ethan, predictably, disappeared once the scandal broke, leaving her to face the fallout alone. She tried to reconnect with the girls, sending gifts and messages, but I kept a firm boundary in place. I didn't want her toxic influence affecting them, and the court order supported my decision. Months turned into years, and the pain of Jessica's betrayal faded into a distant memory. I met new people, reconnected with old friends, and even started dating again. It wasn't easy to trust, but I took my time, focusing on healing and rediscovering who I was outside of my marriage. One day, as I sat on the porch watching my daughters play in the yard, I realized how far I'd come. The weight of the past no longer held me down. My life was no longer defined by what Jessica had done, but by the choices I had made to move forward. Jessica, now a shadow of her former self, reached out one last time, begging for forgiveness and a chance to rebuild a relationship with the girls. I listened to her tearful plea, but stood firm. Forgiveness might come one day, but trust never would. She had made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. As I closed the door on that chapter of my life, I felt a profound sense of peace. Jessica's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also given me something invaluable, a new beginning. And this time, it was on my terms,